Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Riki Stamps, Director of Programs and Events at Butterfield Trail Village, and I am just so happy to be here again today interviewing a couple of residents I have a feeling you may know. I'm very honored to have Curtis and Jane Shipley. And we're so glad you're here today. This is one of maybe, I don't know, I think I've already interviewed 6 residents, one couple other than yourself. And it's just a very casual conversation, and it's a chance for residents to get to know each other. Right now, with the COVID going on, we cannot socialize very much. We've had several new residents move in, and this is a great way for all residents to get to know each other, but I'm so excited to get to know you better. Many of you may know Jane. Her mother, Irma Boyer, was a resident here for many, many years. I think she moved in 1999. And we all loved Miss Irma. She was an amazing volunteer, retired teacher.
She did.
And we had Miss Irma until she was 109 years old. And I just think that is amazing. And I want to compliment Jane right now on the front end of this interview for her care and dedication of her mom.
It was Butterfield's care.
Well,
not mine.
Thank you, Jane. But I admired your personal care of your mom through all these years. And that's how we kind of got to know each other on the front end. Got to know Curtis a little later. But I do want to start with you today, Curtis. Many people associate you with Shipley Baking Company, obviously. And we'll get to all of that here in just a little bit. But when we visited yesterday in their apartment, which is beautiful, by the way, they have gorgeous artwork. Curtis has been so involved in the Fayetteville community and in Northwest Arkansas, for that matter. And I want to just go over some of these wonderful things that you've been a part of. And if you're from Fayetteville, all of this will mean a lot to you. If you weren't born and raised here, you are reaping the benefits of the people like Curtis who have worked so hard to make our community as amazing as it is. Curtis, you served as a board member on the Washington Regional Medical Center. You were Fayetteville Chamber of Commerce member and president, I believe. And you served on the Board of Advisors for the University of Arkansas, where you attended school. You were on the foundation board for the University of Arkansas. And many of us know about Save Old Main. So many people, including Lewis Epley and other key figures in Fayetteville community to help save the historic Old Main. And a lot of people associate you with First National Bank. And so one of the most interesting topics we talked about yesterday when we visited was your time on the Beaver Lake Water District project. And that changed the face of Northwest Arkansas when that all began. And it's amazing how much water is churned out for Northwest Arkansas because of the Beaver Lake Water District. So of all these things that I mentioned, Curtis, why don't you share with us 2 of your most favorite projects?
Well, I'd have to say that one of the greatest things I enjoyed was being on Beaver Water District for 28 years. And I took the seat of Hal Douglas, who was on the original board. And to this date, there's only been 3 people sit in that seat: Hal Douglas, myself, and Woody Bassett. And we all know how important water is in the development of Northwest Arkansas. It was critically important to the canning industry. It was critically important to the poultry industry, and it was important to Fayetteville and the university to have good water. And people, it was the first. Beaver Water was really the first effort of the total Northwest area to work together in the common interest of doing something. So that was one of the things that was particularly fun. I enjoyed doing. The other thing I think probably I enjoyed doing was being on the board of Washington Regional Medical Center.
Yes.
And I was on that board 28 years as well. Probably stayed too long. I really enjoyed it. we all realized early on that if Fayetteville was going to continue to grow, that we had to develop something other than the university. And we picked out healthcare. And so many of the young students at the university would go off to med school and they say, where do I want to live? They said, we want to live in Northwest Arkansas. So we all felt like we needed to have a hospital and have the facilities and to grow the healthcare industry so that people would not have to leave Northwest Arkansas in order to get good health care. So anyway, the hospital became a challenge. It was Washington Regional Medical Center started out as a county hospital.
Okay.
And technically it is still owned by the county. It's leased to the Washington Regional Medical Center Board, and they operate the hospital. At the end of a 99-year lease, they have to give the hospital back to the county. Anyway, the hospital developed on North Street, as everybody knows, and that's now the site of UAMS. And that's important to us as well because we're going to see a lot of growth, I think, in that area in the next few years, particularly. Anyway, we started out on North Street, and we were probably the only hospital that didn't have any doctor's offices that's close by. So at one point, we decided that we needed to move out and get more room and more space, and the VA was not willing to give us any more land. So it became essential that we find land someplace to move the hospital. And a lot of people worked on this project over the years. And finally, we bought the property where the hospital is now. And that was part of the old Herbert Thomas farm. And the farmhouse is still there, and that's the headquarters for the foundation, the Thomas home. Anyway, the psychology of it was that if you lived at Farmington or Prairie Grove, or you lived at Lincoln, or you lived at West Park or Greenland, or you lived out Highway 16, you'd have to drive by the property where the hospital is now, and that was a central located place to be. And as we all know, that has developed into a tremendous thing.
Yes, it has.
And
Absolutely.
I've had a lot of fun being on that board and watching it grow, and it's continuing to grow. And basically, it is a community-owned hospital to serve the people of Northwest Arkansas.
Well, it's an amazing facility, wonderful hospital. My children were born in the old hospital on North Street, and then a couple of years later they broke ground on the new one. So we're very fortunate to have a hospital of that size. I want to jump back to the Beaver Lake Water District. When we visited yesterday, I'd like for you to help explain how you're mentioning something about the top 5 feet of the water and how that serves our community, and then the Lowell plant.
Okay, well, when Beaver Lake was being formed and the dam was getting ready to be built to form the lake, Fayetteville had Lake Fayetteville and Lake Sequoia. So we had what might be considered an adequate supply of water. Springdale and Rogers did not have good water sources, and they desperately needed the water. So to the benefit of all, Fayetteville decided to go forward with the other towns and communities and to form Beaver Water District. And what that amounted to was the top 5 feet of the dam. All the water from the dam all the way back to the headwaters is the base for the water that Beaver Water District has access to on a daily basis. What is that? That's 150 million gallons of water a day is what our water rights are.
Wow, that's a lot of water.
That's a lot of water. And so anyway, the dam was built. the water district was formed. And now what are we going to do with this water? Well, they decided that in order to be fair to everybody, all the cities, we'd build the water treatment plant at Lowell. And so Lowell became the site of the Beaver Water District. And there was an intake tower that was built out in the middle of the lake. In other words, they built a pyramid in the middle of the lake and take the water off the bottom of the lake, pump it in and treat it, and then Beaver Water sells their water at our property line to Fayetteville, to Springdale, and then to Rogers. Rogers sold their water to Bentonville. So that's the way the thing started, and that's where the water came, the 5 feet of water came from. So when you actually think about it, the water, all the drinking water comes from Lowell back to the headwaters.
I see.
In other words, the water is not being consumed or treated at the dam site. It's from the Lowell treatment plant back. And over the years, we built another intake tower on land, and that goes out into the lake to get the water to bring in to be treated. So it's a real interesting story, the story of water. And water has been one of the key things that has allowed us to grow and prosper in Northwest Arkansas.
Absolutely. You were telling me in the beginning, Fayetteville had more gallons of water, was using more gallons of water.
Right.
And what are the numbers today?
Okay, well, I think I haven't seen any numbers of late, actually real late. But in the meantime, Bentonville has grown so that they became a full partner to the Beaver Water District. And so they have their own pipeline now. They used to feed off the Rogers pipeline, but now they have their own water supply, and Bentonville uses more water than Rogers. And Springdale probably is, and Fayetteville kind of neck and neck, I think, but still very close as far as usage is concerned. And the peak now is usually in the summertime, and when everybody waters their yard and does all that sort of thing. Well, that's when the peak usage is for the water.
Well, those projects were huge in making Northwest Arkansas what it is, and it's just like you said, it has helped us continue to grow in a responsible manner. And so many people drink Beaver Lake water, but they also enjoy recreation. I was just out there a couple of weeks ago with my kids on a party barge, and it's beautiful out there. It's a great place to hang out with the family. But Curtis, I want to move on just a little bit, and we're going to rewind that clock. We're going to take you all the way back to where you're young and spry and maybe a twinkle in your daddy's eye. You were born in Fort Smith.
Yes, I was born in Fort Smith in 1933 in the middle of the Depression, and I grew up, I'm a product of the Fort Smith school system, went through high school in Fort Smith, and my senior year in high school, the Korean War started, and everybody got nervous about it, and anyway, after I graduated, I came on up here to Fayetteville to the university, and had 4 wonderful years here. And I was in ROTC, but by the time I got to my senior year, the Air Force wanted only people who were going to go to flight school and stay for 5 years. Well, I didn't want to do that. So I dropped out of ROTC and ended up getting drafted after I graduated from the university. So anyway, I spent 2 years in the Army, 2 years in the National Guard, and 2 years in the Reserve following that. And then I came up here to Fayetteville to run our bakery up here. And it was here from 62 until I've been here ever since, really.
You shared with me that your father, for whatever reasons, had to leave school, but at the early age of 12, started working in a bakery.
That's right. Dad and his brother, W.G. Shipley, Garvin Shipley, who many people here in Fayetteville knew. They were sort of raised in the Chester, Arkansas area, and they were there when the railroad was built, and the tunnel was built on the railroad, which was a big thing. And so after that, my grandfather went broke, and he moved back to Fort Smith and had a little farm out on the Arkansas River. Well, he got flooded out the first spring. And so my father was 12 years old and his brother was 15, and they went to work in a little bakery in Van Buren, Arkansas called Edmondson's Bakery. And then about 1903 or 4, they moved the bakery to Fort Smith, which had become the larger of the two towns. And then in 1920, the two Shipley brothers went in business for themselves, and they took off immediately and built a bakery in McAlester, Oklahoma in 23.
Oh, wow.
24 in Muskogee, and in 1926 they bought a bakery on the Fayetteville Square, on the south side of the Fayetteville Square, that was owned by a gentleman named Crow's Bakery, and so then later they built the bakery in 1936 on Dixon Street, and that was the home of the bakery and up until we closed it.
And the one that most of us are very familiar with because it's still on the name is still on the building, and it's right there, Art Deco style.
That's
from the
right.
30s. Beautiful
right.
building.
It's a beautiful yellow brick building with Art Deco markings, and I feel so fortunate to have been able to have spent most of my business career in that building, looking off in the distance at Old Main, and watching the young students come up and down the street and all that sort of thing. And I've watched the turnover in the street from, it lost its, it was
Dixon lost its allure for a little while.
Allure for a long time, and I give Dan Ferreter credit for help bringing it back. He wanted to tie the town and the university back together again. And the Walton Art Center was important to that, and the redevelopment of the Dixon Street area, and that's the way some of that happened. But anyway, I was kind of in the middle of some of that all through all that time frame.
A lot of property changed hands over those years, and
gosh,
always
yes.
for the better.
Sure.
I mean, everything's continued to grow and develop in a positive way. So when it was a bakery, an operating bakery, the brand was Wholesome Bread.
Wholesome Bread.
Is that, I know we'll get into the fact of what happened afterwards, but is that loaf of bread still on the shelf these days?
It is in parts of the country, but not very many.
Okay.
It was a franchise that we opened up and went in business in 1920 with Wholesome Bread. Don't say bread, say wholesome.
Okay.
That was the theme, and that was Wholesome Bread, and a family in Indiana said, well, if the family bakery, small family baker, was going to compete with the big national chain bakeries, you had to have a name that was familiar to everybody, and you had to have advertising and laboratory services and that sort of thing. So they developed a company, and they came up with the name Wholesome. And we bought the Wholesome name for Arkansas and Oklahoma and part of southern Missouri.
So basically, Shipley made sandwich loaf bread.
We made bread for wholesale. We were wholesale bakers.
Okay.
For grocery stores and restaurants and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And we were running probably around 125 loaves of bread a minute, and 500 or 600 hamburger buns a minute. And the bakery here at Fayetteville, we made all the wheat breads, the variety breads and all that sort of thing for our system. And then we would interchange product every day. And then from the two bakeries, transports would go out to depots where we had other trucks located. And at depots, we had thrift stores and that kind of thing. And then from there, they'd just branch out to all the stores and that sort of thing. And of course, the big difference is today from then, as much as anything, was when I started, there was a little grocery store in every other block. Almost all over, every little town you'd go into had a lot of mom and pop grocery stores.
Right.
And now, of course, there's Walmart and there's Kroger and there's Harps and there's lots of big.
It.
That's about it. That's right.
I bet it smelled wonderful in those days. Every day, even if you worked at the bank or whatever downtown, and you could smell the bread. I bet that was just.
Oh, people always talk about that, about the smell of the bread on Sunday morning, particularly if you go into church or something, you smell the bread floating up Dixon Street.
Oh, how awesome would that be? I want to, just for nostalgia, I want you to talk about jugs across the street.
Jug Wheelers?
If you'll talk the drive-in.
I can talk about Jug all day. Jug Wheeler had been was an institution. He had the largest drive-in in Fayetteville in Arkansas.
And we're not talking theater drive-in. We're talking food.
Food.
Yes.
He had a drive-in restaurant, and after World War II, he had the little Volkswagen Bugs, and they would deliver up on the campus to the veterans. And then a lot of veterans, of course, were 21 or older, and they could drink beer. And they would have a quart of beer and a hamburger, and they'd deliver for 15 cents, and that was the way things were. And Jug was my buddy, and I'd have coffee with him almost every day. He had the Deluxe Cafe as well, which was next door to Jug's Drive-In. And eventually, when he closed the drive-in, he told Pauline, his wife, says, "Don't ever sell this corner. That's where Bardino's is now. Don't you ever sell that to Curtis." And I said, "Why? Why won't you sell it to me?" He says, "Because I want Pauline to have an income every month. I know you'll always pay the bill." Some of the people, he owned where the Deluxe was, and Razorback Cleaners. Some of the other guys weren't as good at paying the rent as I was. And so his wife would have the money to pay things.
That's such a sweet story.
Jug was something else. He was a little not very tall, and very interesting guy.
And I'm sure he saw a lot of changes on Dixon Street, just like you did in those years, for sure.
Sometime I probably ought to give you a separate interview just on Dixon Street. Because at one time, if you start up at the head of Dixon Street, the churches, and come all the way down, it was the heart of the town. College Club Dairy, Coca-Cola Bottling Company, the ice plant, Arcola Sand and Gravel, Hamel Soup, McCord Sell Grocery, 4 lumber yards, all were located on Dixon Street.
That is a lot of history.
It was a lot of the tax base for the town, and of course then everybody moved off, except the bakery. And I felt like I always tell everybody we couldn't move the bakery because we had to have bread tomorrow. We never could shut the ovens down, that kind of thing.
Oh, well, Curtis, this is wonderful. I love the story, and I have learned so much about the Beaver Water District. Just amazed me. We could talk about that probably for another 30 minutes, but I love learning about the bakery and your family history, and I think it's so awesome when families continue a business, and I'm sure your father was very proud of you, your uncle, very proud of you, and your brother, and I think that's just probably a great memory you'll always have.
That's right. We certainly will have. That's for sure.
Well, one of the best memories I hope you ever have is the day you met this lovely lady.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I do want to talk about Miss Jane right now. Jane, you were, well, let's just do this. Let's just start with your parents and where they were and where you were born, and just bring us up to date to the first time you came to Fayetteville.
Okay, first time, good.
Yeah.
I've been here 2-3 times, that's good. Both my parents are were fervent Arkansans. They really loved the state, the cities where they lived. My mother was born in Abbott, tiny little town south of Fort Smith. My father was born in Oklahoma, but moved here as a small child, so
Okay.
it was his home. He lived in Beaver down in White County.
I know where that is.
My mother's father had a general store, so she got to work in the store as a kid and bigger and so on. She wrote a wonderful story, The Country Store, in a creative writing class that she was taking.
Oh,
So
I bet that's interesting.
I want to give the library a copy of that because it's a good little story about Arkansas.
What an honor, yes. We'd love to have that.
And they met at Arkansas Tech University at first. They both worked and went to school during the Depression, so it was back and forth. Work a while, go to school for a while, and that. But they married in 1937, and after that we moved. They lived, and then I was part of the family later, and we lived in small towns. I was born in Bauxite, Arkansas.
And we talked about that
did,
earlier.
yes. I know.
I found out my grandmother was born in Bauxite, and your good friend Doug Pritchard.
That's right.
Had time in Bauxite.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a real company town in those days, I think. We actually lived in Benton, but the hospital was in Bauxite. And then we lived in southern Arkansas in the Pine Bluff area for quite a long time. For a long time, my father was with the Extension Service. He was truly a farmer through and through. He loved agriculture, and we did that. And then he was an all-timer. He ran a big cotton plantation. We came to Fayetteville in the mid-50s. He joined the university as an entomologist, and through these years, my mother was teaching and doing different things too. But we lived here, and Fayetteville was just Mecca then to them. They had been back here at school too, at the university at different times.
I have a question. Your father was at the university as an entomologist. Did he work with Dr. Lloyd Warren?
Yes, he did.
Did he?
Yes, he did. Yes.
He was a resident.
Yes,
His wife Ruby were residents here.
Yes.
Delightful man.
Definitely.
Dr.
Yes.
Warren was so awesome.
There's some other residents here who were in that department. Seth Young.
Yes.
Bill Jones.
Bill Jones.
And I think there might be another. It was, Polly Lancaster's late husband, Jay.
Yes.
So there were,
JL.
yeah,
That's
there were a lot of
right.
entomologists.
Big department.
Yeah. It was a very important department for.
And that's all part of agriculture and everything, which is so important to Arkansas.
Yes.
So you moved to Fayetteville in the 50s, which I bet was a fun time.
It was a fun time. Fayetteville was a beautiful little town then.
Yeah.
It still is, but it's.
So you graduated from Fayetteville High School?
I did, and then to the university.
And what was your major?
Major was marketing. Textile merchandising and marketing was my major at that time. Later, I got into teaching, and so I went to graduate school in education. But first time it was going to be more business-like.
Well, of course, Jane's mother, Irma, was a teacher forever.
Yep.
And loved it and
forever
changed so many lives. And she's been honored by her students on her previous birthdays time and time again. And I got the feeling in the beginning you kind of did not want to be a teacher.
Yeah, right. No, I didn't.
Didn't want to be a school teacher.
No, I didn't want to do that. There was a whole big world out there.
You wanted to design clothes or houses.
Yes, design clothes and deal with, fine apparel is what I wanted. And then I moved to Houston for just a few months after graduation, came back to Fayetteville and needed a job. and got a job teaching, which was I was very happy to have it. It's one of those times that you need something and you take the job.
Absolutely.
And I thought I just know nothing about it. And right away, I just fell in love with it. I've really enjoyed it. And from then on, nothing was as good. Nothing was as satisfying as that.
And we're also fortunate when we find our niche like that.
We are. Yep. Even though it was in and out, other reasons, but it was definitely something I enjoyed doing. So
What did you teach elementary?
Mainly elementary.
Mainly?
Mm-hmm. Little junior high for a while, but mainly elementary.
I would have gone back to elementary if I had taught junior high for a little while too.
It didn't take long.
Yeah, junior high is such an awkward age. And we were all there, but I don't know. I bless those teachers who teach in junior high level or high school level these days and competing with cell phones and all of that.
Oh, mm-hmm.
Yeah. But all right, well, you're at the university and you graduated. Where did Miss Jane go then?
I came back and went away for a couple of years as a civilian with the Army. I worked as a civilian for the Army in Korea for a while. And then I came back and moved to, here in graduate school, then I moved to New Jersey, right outside of New York. And I went there because my husband at the time was working there. And I kind of thought, oh, it'll be a year or two, then we'll be moving something else. And I stayed 27 years in the New York area, which was a pretty wonderful thing.
I bet. And I would love for you to just tell us a little bit about your experiences, your jobs, and just your overall persona of New York when you were there.
I loved it. I never got tired of it. It was the thing that I went into New York every chance I could. I went on every bus, subway that I could find. I walked the streets. I went to every museum and whatever public building. I never got tired of it. I always wanted more. And then and my children were born there and grew up there. It was nice. We lived in a suburb in New Jersey, and it wasn't city-like where we were living. So going into the city was still good. And then after my children were gone, they had graduated and gone on to college and away, and I thought, I don't know if this is where I want to stay after a while. I hadn't totally scratched that itch, but it was enough that I wanted to get back to some place that seemed to be, I could live a little easier. And there was always a pull back to Arkansas. And I thought, well, I'll start looking for a job here. And my mother was here, of course. By that time, my father was not. And I still had other family here, relatives. So I started looking for a job here. And I was teaching then and again. And I thought I'll try to teach. And I wrote letters to every school in Northwest Arkansas, every district, trying to get back into teaching here. And at one point I said, well, I'm just going to move back anyway. And if I'll work out something. I'll do something until I get a job. But I did. I got a job and I came back here and bought a house, and it was just like I slipped right into Fayetteville. I still had a lot of friends. It was the same town I left, just bigger. I was glad for the growth, because if there hadn't been a growth, there wouldn't be more schools, and I wouldn't have had a job probably. So it was very good.
Where was your first teaching job when you returned to Arkansas?
It was at Holcomb School.
Holcomb?
That school wouldn't have been there if there hadn't been some great growth. And then I was taught at Butterfield Trail School and Jefferson. I taught in other schools too.
So you got settled back into Arkansas, and your mom had moved in 99. When did you move back?
In 98.
In 98, and your mom moved to Butterfield in 99, and so that things are rocking along. But you also wound up, did you know Barbara Pritchard before? Or
No.
Doug?
No, I didn't know, and I did not know them before.
But you did get involved with the Gifted and Talented program.
I did.
Tell us about that.
Barbara Pritchard, a fellow resident here, was kind enough to hire me in the Gifted and Talented program, which I had experienced before, and I had additional credit and college credit for that that specialty. And I taught in that program here in Fayetteville, which was by far the best teaching experience I ever had. It's a wonderful program, highly successful in the schools.
Well,
that was-
Barbara did a lot of work on that program, and
Oh,
she
she
obviously
did.
was recruiting excellent educators to
she's-
be a part of that.
well, she's responsible for the program. There's no doubt.
And very happy that she did start that. It's
Mm-hmm.
still such a benefit to young people
Mm-hmm.
in our schools right now, and helps them advance at an early age because there's so much support there.
Yep. Very for
It's hard
sure.
to find just in a public school classroom setting these days.
Mm-hmm.
So gifted and talent programs, support it in every aspect you possibly can.
Yep. I
Very
agree.
much worth
Yes.
it.
Uh-huh.
So I just want you, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about how you met Curtis.
Well, that was a good time for sure. I have been a lifelong walker early in the mornings, just walking, 2 or 3 miles. And I had some walking buddies. Walking with one is also a resident, Leanne Underwood, who was a neighbor and good friend. And she and 2 others, women there, said, there's this nice man down the street here, right down the street on Ridgeway Drive, that you need to meet. And then they called Curtis and would say the same thing to him. There's this woman who lives down the street here that you need to meet. And so we did. He called, tell them what you said. Well, maybe coffee or lunch.
Well, when I called her up the first, I said, well, who? I kept thinking, they'd call and leave her phone number and then hang up. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just check this out. So I finally got brave enough to call, and I asked her to go for a coffee. She told me she couldn't because she was teaching school. So then I said, well, okay, how about, would you care to go to dinner, or would you go to dinner? And so we went to dinner at our first date, and clicked pretty quickly after that.
Yeah, I think a hot 1 year and they were wed.
Oh, less than a year.
Less than a
yeah.
year.
Take long.
Well, when you know, you know.
When you know, you know.
I know it.
That's
That's
right.
great.
Mm-hmm.
How sweet. And so you lived on Ridgeway, and then from there to Butterfield?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had lived just right,
He
3
li-
minutes from his house
She lived on one point, and I lived on another point.
on the same street
on,
as it
on
went
the
around.
same street. It goes around in a circle. And
So it wasn't far to move.
I lived there 56 years.
Wow. Well, that's a wonderful neighborhood, and it's close, but I am so glad that the both of you decided to make Butterfield your home. And I also want to thank you both very much for your time and contributions to this city. You have a genuine love for Fayetteville, and
Very
it's
much so.
very obvious in all the things you've been a part of, whether you spearheaded it or you just joined a team. And that says a lot about people, I think, when they want to contribute to their community and help it become the best that it can be. And with you in the education field and you in the community with these organizations and serving on these boards, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I know everyone else does too. And I want to close with you telling me the best time you can recall that all the kids and grandkids have been together recently. What's something that just, was it Christmas? Was it Thanksgiving, a birthday party? What's some amazing time
Last
that
time
you've had
everybody
together?
was together.
Was that the beach trip?
Well, the beach
that
trip was
no.
one of them, that's for sure.
But 3 children weren't there that time, hadn't been born at that point. As sad as it may sound, but it was not. It was at my mother's service in January this year. And even though the occasion was very sad, she was so beloved in that family. And she had 4 grandsons, and they all just could not say enough wonderful things about her.
I was in the back row, and I remember.
We had something like 80 members of her family and my family here
And
that
cousins,
service for dinner at the lodge after the.
cousins just came from
All over.
everywhere. They came. I have a cousin in Alaska who came for it. A lot of people came from Texas and from Washington, D.C. as far as they could. She was that kind of a beloved. I mean, she was really the matriarch
beloved.
of the family.
Yes, she was.
And so it was the extended family and then our immediate family. It was one of the last times, well, it was the last time that we've all been together. And probably the last time, I don't know.
Well, that's a wonder.
Recent.
I mean, it was a somber occasion, but it shows true family.
But everybody was still so happy.
Yeah.
Just happy because of who she had been.
And all the memories.
And fortunately, we were able to do it before we got pinned up here.
Yeah, it was right before
know,
the kind of the
Because it was nice for everybody to come.
before-
We couldn't-
COVID-19
Yeah.
And we had
slowdown.
the service in this room, and that was nice too.
Very nice to have.
She would have liked that.
Well, I have just loved getting to know the both of you, and I hope we have more conversations and
I do
swap
too.
some fun stories. And I
do
want to
too.
talk a little bit more about my hometown of Pine Bluff and
I
our
do too.
connection to Bauxite at
I
some
do
time in the
too.
future.
I do too. Yeah.
But in the meantime, I would like to gift you something. At one time, when you decided to sell Shipley Baking, you sold the stock to what company was it?
Flowers Foods.
Flowers Foods. And that's a conglomerate bakery,
It's
correct?
a big family. It started out as a family baker like us, but kept acquiring other family bakers. And now they're the second largest company in the country in the bread business.
And what is your favorite bread that they make?
Dave's Killer Bread.
All right. Quickly, I want you to tell us who Dave is.
Okay, well, Dave is an ex-convict from Oregon who got out of, apparently had killed somebody or something. Got in, anyway, he was in the penitentiary and he got out, and his brother and his father, he had the ability to formulate some good breads. And so they started this bakery called Dave's Killer Bread. And Dave's Killer Bread today is the largest organic bread being sold in the United States, and the largest also in Canada. And so anyway, it's a real good story, and almost 4 out of 5 employees at the bakery, which is now owned by Flowers Foods, are as an ex-convict. They believe in giving people a second chance.
And I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're doing something good, and they're feeding America, which I think
They
is
have
great.
Nature's Own, they have Cobblestone, they have
Sunbeam.
Wonder Bread, they own Wonder Bread, Sunbeam Bread, Little Miss Sunbeam, Wholesome Bread, they've got a whole bunch of
They have a
labels.
bunch of breads.
Yeah.
Well, they're 2 loaves short today because I'm about to
Oh.
gift you.
Well, you ought to keep one. Isn't that?
This is Dave's Killer Bread, thin slice, 21 whole grains and seeds, organic bread.
Thank you. Oh, my.
And I bet that makes the best toast in the
That's-
morning
that-
with
this
a little
is
butter.
wonderful.
It is wonderful.
And this is the Dave's Killer Bread, thin sliced, good seed, organic.
Right.
Don't know the difference other than that's got a lot more nuts and grains on it.
Thank
But you
you.
guys are in the
Thank you.
bread for a few days.
I'll say.
Oh, we
And
have,
there's Dave playing the guitar.
That's right. I guess he was a convicted convict, turned his life around and can play the guitar as well and bake.
if you, they just come out with a new English muffin
Oh,
under the Dave's Killer Bread label, and I'll tell you, it is the best English muffin I've ever eaten.
well, we're
I
going to have to
really-
get some English muffins.
So it gives you something to look forward to.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you so much
Well,
for
thank
everything.
you. I appreciate you
Thank you.
both. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.